3 years had passed since my husband, Ethan, died in a tragic car accident, but some mornings still felt as if I had lost him yesterday. Grief was a strange thing. It didn't disappear with time the way people promised it would. Instead, it settled quietly into the corners of your life, waiting for unexpected moments to remind you of what you'd lost. Sometimes it was the smell of Ethan's favorite coffee. Sometimes it was hearing a song we used to dance to in the kitchen. And sometimes it was seeing our daughter, Lily, smile exactly the way he did. At 8 years old, Lily was the reason I got out of bed every morning. She was the reason I kept moving forward when every part of me wanted to stop. Together, we had survived the worst years of our lives. We had learned how to live in a house that felt too quiet, how to celebrate birthdays with one empty chair at the table, and how to carry Ethan's memory without letting it crush us. It wasn't easy. I worked long hours at a medical office to keep our finances stable. By the time I got home each evening, I was exhausted. There were bills to pay, homework to check, dinners to cook, and endless responsibilities that never seemed to end. Some nights, after Lily had fallen asleep, I sat alone in the living room, wondering if I was doing enough. My parents often stepped in to help. They picked Lily up from school when I worked late. They attended her soccer games when I couldn't get time off. They brought casseroles to our house and constantly reminded me that family would always be there for us. I trusted them completely. After all, they were my parents. When everyone else drifted away after Ethan's funeral, they remained. They listened when I cried. They held Lily when she missed her father. They became an important part of our support system. Looking back now, I wonder whether the warning signs were already there. Maybe I simply didn't want to see them. One rainy Thursday evening, my mother arrived unexpectedly at my front door. She looked unusually nervous. Her eyes were red and she clutched a large manila envelope against her chest. "Mom," I asked, "is everything okay? I found something," she said softly. The tone in her voice immediately made my stomach tighten. She stepped inside and sat at the kitchen table while I made tea. For several minutes she barely spoke. She just stared at the envelope, as if it contained something dangerous. Finally, she pushed it toward me. "I found this while cleaning out some boxes in our attic." I frowned. "What is it?" My mother swallowed hard. "It's from Ethan." The world seemed to stop. My hands froze halfway toward the envelope. "What do you mean?" "There were some of his belongings stored at our house after the accident. I guess this got mixed in with everything else." My heart began pounding. Slowly, I opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter. The moment I saw Ethan's name signed at the bottom, tears instantly filled my eyes. For a second, it felt like hearing his voice again after years of silence. The letter was dated only 2 weeks before his death. With trembling hands, I began reading. At first, the words seemed loving. Ethan wrote about how much he loved Lily and how proud he was to be her father. But as I continued reading, my confusion grew. The tone changed. He wrote about concerns for the future. He wrote about worries that I might struggle if something happened to him. Then came the sentence that shattered me. If he ever died unexpectedly, he supposedly wanted Lily to be raised by my parents. I read the line 3 times, unable to believe it. My chest tightened. Ethan had never said anything like that, not once. Yet there it was, written in black ink above his signature. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I know this is difficult," she whispered. I couldn't speak. Part of me wanted to reject the letter immediately. Another part of me desperately wanted to believe that these were truly Ethan's final thoughts. As tears rolled down my cheeks, I stared at the signature again. Something about it felt wrong. I couldn't explain why. But for the first time since Ethan's death, A different kind of pain began growing inside me, not grief, not sadness, doubt, and I had no idea that this single letter was about to destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. For weeks after my mother showed me the letter, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I carried a photocopy in my purse and found myself reading it over and over again whenever I was alone. Every time I looked at Ethan's supposed words, my emotions twisted into knots. Part of me felt guilty for questioning something that might have been his final message, but another part of me couldn't ignore the uneasiness growing inside me. The letter simply didn't sound like him. Ethan had always believed in me. When Lily was born, he used to joke that I was the strongest person he knew. During difficult times, he never doubted my ability to take care of our family. Even after his death, I couldn't imagine him secretly writing a letter suggesting our daughter should be raised by someone else. Yet my parents seemed determined to treat the letter as gospel. At first, the changes were subtle. My mother started asking if Lily could spend more weekends at their house. My father repeatedly mentioned how much stability grandparents could provide. They spoke as if they were simply following Ethan's wishes. Then their comments became more direct. "You work so much," my mother said one evening while washing dishes. "I'm doing what I have to do," I replied. "We know that, but Lily needs consistency." The remark stung. I had sacrificed everything for my daughter, every overtime shift, every missed vacation, every sleepless night. Everything I did was for her. Still, I tried to stay calm. Maybe they were just worried. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But the uneasy feeling refused to leave. One Saturday afternoon, while Lily was visiting my parents, I pulled out an old storage box from the closet. Inside were dozens of handwritten notes Ethan had left throughout our marriage, birthday cards, anniversary letters, shopping lists, little love notes tucked into lunch bags. I spread them across the dining room table. Then I placed the mysterious letter beside them. At first glance, everything looked similar, the same slanted handwriting, the same loops and curves, the same signature, but as I studied the pages more carefully, tiny differences began appearing. Ethan always wrote the letter Y a certain way. In the new letter, it looked slightly different. His capital L usually had a distinctive curve. The curve was missing. His signature seemed almost perfect, as if someone had copied it too carefully. My pulse quickened. Maybe grief had made me paranoid. Maybe I was imagining things. Still, I couldn't shake the suspicion. The following week, I visited a handwriting expert recommended by a lawyer friend. I felt ridiculous carrying the documents into the office. Part of me expected the expert to glance at them and tell me everything was authentic. Instead, he spent nearly 2 hours examining every page through magnifying equipment. When he finally looked up, his expression was serious. "Mrs. Carter," he said carefully, "where did you get this letter?" A chill ran through me. Why? He hesitated. Because there are significant inconsistencies. My stomach dropped. What kind of inconsistencies? "The writer appears to have imitated your husband's handwriting rather than naturally producing it." For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. The room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. "Are you saying it's fake?" He nodded slowly. "I can't provide a final report without additional testing, but my professional opinion is that this document was likely forged." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Forged, not mistaken, not misunderstood. Forged. I drove home in a daze, every traffic light blurred through tears. Every memory of my parents suddenly felt different. Surely there had to be another explanation. Surely my mother hadn't knowingly handed me a fake letter. Surely my father wasn't involved. These were the people who raised me, the people who taught me right from wrong, the people I trusted with my daughter. Yet deep inside, a terrible realization was beginning to form. If the letter was fake, someone had created it intentionally. Someone had copied Ethan's handwriting. Someone had manufactured his final wishes, and whoever did it wasn't trying to honor his memory. They were trying to use it. That evening, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice sounded cheerful. "Lily wants to stay another week with us," she said. Would that be okay? I stared silently at the wall. For the first time in my life, I found myself wondering whether the people on the other end of the line were capable of something far darker than I had ever imagined. And as I listened to my mother's voice, one terrifying question echoed through my mind: if they forged the letter, what else were they hiding? The day I received the official handwriting analysis report, the last piece of my innocence disappeared. The expert's conclusion was clear and undeniable. The letter had not been written by Ethan. It was a forgery. I sat alone in my living room staring at the report for nearly an hour. Outside, rain tapped against the windows, but all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat. Someone had forged a letter from my dead husband. Someone had taken the memory of the man I loved and turned it into a weapon. And the evidence pointed directly toward my parents. The thought was almost impossible to accept. For days, I walked around feeling numb. Every childhood memory felt tainted. Every family photo suddenly looked different. I kept asking myself how the people who had tucked me into bed at night could be capable of such cruelty. But the more I thought about it, the more pieces began falling into place. The constant pressure for Lily to stay with them. The remarks about my long work hours. The way they kept mentioning Ethan's final wishes. None of it had happened by accident. It had been building for months, maybe even years. Instead of confronting them immediately, I decided to do something they never expected. I stayed quiet. If my parents truly believed I accepted the letter, they would let their guard down. And that's exactly what happened. Over the next several weeks, I began gathering evidence. I saved every text message, recorded every voicemail, documented every conversation. Meanwhile, my parents became increasingly confident. One evening during dinner at their house, my father casually mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "Lily seems happier here," he said while cutting his steak. I looked up. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "She likes having structure." My mother nodded in agreement, and honestly, sweetheart, raising a child alone isn't easy. The implication was obvious. They didn't think I was enough. I forced myself to smile and change the subject. Inside, however, I was furious. A few days later, I discovered something even more disturbing. While organizing old financial documents, I noticed that my parents had opened a savings account for Lily nearly a year before the mysterious letter appeared. At first, that seemed harmless. Then I found paperwork listing them as potential custodial guardians. The date stunned me. The forms had been completed months before they supposedly found Ethan's letter. My hands shook as I stared at the documents. They had been planning something long before the letter surfaced. The forgery wasn't an emotional mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was part of a strategy. I immediately shared the information with my attorney. Her reaction was immediate. "This changes everything," she said. The investigation intensified. Through legal discovery, we uncovered emails between my parents and a family law attorney. The messages discussed guardianship, options, and custody concerns months before the forged letter ever appeared. Each new piece of evidence felt like another knife in my chest, but it also strengthened my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for Lily. The custody hearing finally arrived on a gray Monday morning. My parents entered the courtroom looking confident. My mother carried tissues. My father wore the same calm expression he always used when he believed he was in control. For a brief moment, seeing them there broke my heart. These were still my parents. A small part of me wished they would stand up, admit everything, and apologize. But they didn't. Instead, they repeated the same lies. They claimed the letter was authentic. They claimed their actions were motivated by love. They claimed they only wanted what was best for Lily. Then my attorney stood. One by one, she presented the evidence. The handwriting analysis, the guardianship paperwork, the emails, the timelines, the contradictions. With every document placed before the judge, my parents' confidence faded. My father's face turned pale. My mother's hands began trembling. For the first time, they realized the truth could no longer be hidden. The courtroom fell silent as the judge reviewed the evidence. Finally, he looked directly at my parents. His expression was colder than I had ever seen. The forged letter was declared fraudulent. The guardianship petition immediately lost credibility. Years of trust collapsed in a matter of minutes. As I sat there holding back tears, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just heartbreak. Because the people who had tried to take my daughter weren't strangers. They were my own parents, and by the end of that hearing, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Even if I won the case, our family would never be the same again. Winning the court case should have felt like the happiest day of my life. Instead, it felt like attending a funeral, not for a person, but for a relationship. For years, I had believed my parents would always be my safe place. No matter how difficult life became, I thought they would be the people I could trust. But sitting in that courtroom, listening to evidence expose their lies, I realized that trust had died long before the judge made his ruling. The drive home was quiet. Lily sat in the back seat humming softly as she looked out the window. She didn't fully understand everything that had happened, and I was grateful for that. She was still a child. She didn't need to carry the weight of adult betrayals. I glanced at her through the rear-view mirror. She smiled when she noticed me looking. That smile reminded me why I had fought so hard, not to punish my parents, not to win an argument, but to protect her. For the next few days, my phone rang constantly. My mother called first. Then my father, then relatives, then family friends. Everyone seemed to have an opinion. Most of them didn't know the full story. They only knew that a court battle had happened and that I was refusing to speak with my parents. Finally, after dozens of missed calls, my mother showed up at my front door. When I opened it, she immediately burst into tears. "Please," she begged, "just let me explain." For a moment, I saw the woman who had raised me, the woman who used to braid my hair before school, the woman who kissed my forehead when I was sick. The sight almost broke my resolve, almost. What is there to explain? I asked quietly. She wiped her eyes. We were trying to help. By forging a letter from my dead husband, her face crumpled. We thought Lily would have a better life. The words hit me harder than I expected. Not because they were surprising, because they confirmed everything. My parents truly believed they knew better than I did. They hadn't seen me as Lily's mother. They had seen me as an obstacle. "You never trusted me," I said. "That's not true." "It is true." Tears filled my eyes. When Ethan died, I needed support. I needed family. Instead, you spent months planning how to take my daughter. My mother had no answer. For the first time, silence spoke louder than words. A week later, my father called. Unlike my mother, he wasn't emotional. He was angry. "You've embarrassed this family," he said. I laughed bitterly. "You're worried about embarrassment. You could have handled this privately." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even after everything, he still refused to take responsibility. That conversation made my decision final. I blocked both of their numbers. I blocked emails. I blocked social media accounts. I informed relatives that I would no longer discuss the situation. The door was closed completely. The first few months were harder than I expected. Cutting off parents isn't something anyone dreams about doing. There were birthdays they missed, holidays spent without them, moments when I reached for the phone out of habit before remembering everything that had happened. Grief returned in a different form. Not grief for Ethan, grief for the family I thought I had, but slowly life began to heal. Without constant manipulation and stress, our home felt peaceful again. Lily seemed happier. I felt lighter. We started creating new traditions together: Friday movie nights, weekend road trips, pancake breakfasts on Sunday mornings. Little by little, joy returned to our lives. One evening, nearly a year after the trial, Lily and I sat on the back porch watching the sunset. She held an old photograph of Ethan. "Daddy loved us a lot, didn't he?" she asked. My throat tightened. More than anything, she smiled at the picture, then she looked at me. "I think he'd be proud of you." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Tears blurred my vision as I stared at the fading sunlight. All those years, I had worried about disappointing Ethan. I had worried about making mistakes. I had worried about whether I was strong enough to raise Lily alone. But in that moment, I finally understood something important. Strength isn't about never being hurt. It's about protecting the people you love, even when it costs you everything. My parents had given me an impossible choice: them or my daughter, and I would choose Lily every single time. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, I wrapped my arm around her shoulders and held her close. The sweetest revenge wasn't making my parents suffer. It wasn't exposing them in court. It wasn't winning the case. The sweetest revenge was this: building a beautiful, happy life with the daughter they tried to take, and knowing they would never be part of it again.